Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the untold story of Elon Musk. Specifically, we're going to look at exactly how he built this massive tech empire by taking what most people would consider absolutely monumental risks. Look, whether you follow his every move on social media or you just kind of know his name from the headlines, today we're actually going to break down the mechanics of his journey. So let's just dive right into this. We're going to look closely at his framework, how he actually achieved all this. Because, it's a story that goes way beyond just accumulating a bunch of wealth. It's really about a fascinating and honestly pretty turbulent relationship with extreme, almost unthinkable risk.
I want you to start by genuinely asking yourself a question. What would you actually do if you lost almost everything you had built? Because the reality of human psychology is that most of us would just walk away, right? We'd cut our losses, secure whatever little we had left, and just look for some stability. But to really understand the story we're exploring today, you have to understand that Elon Musk did the exact opposite. When he was faced with the very real prospect of total financial ruin, he didn't retreat. Actually, scratch that. He didn't just not retreat. He doubled down.
You just kept betting on ideas that the rest of the world literally called impossible. We're talking about pouring millions into electric cars when Detroit and the whole global auto industry had completely written them off as, glorified golf carts. Reusable rockets. That was an idea that aerospace giants and seasoned engineers actually laughed at because the physics and the economics just seemed totally insurmountable. Human life beyond Earth, artificial intelligence, and even a radically new future for social media. Today, he's for sure one of the most recognizable entrepreneurs on the planet, but his story didn't begin with Tesla, it didn't begin with SpaceX, and it definitely didn't begin with billions of dollars.
All right, on to our first major chapter, origins, the code, and the internet. Because to really grasp this massive tech empire, you have to understand the foundation it was built on. It all started with a kid in Pretoria, South Africa, who had an absolute obsession with computers.
Just look at how quickly he started turning raw technology into actual opportunity. Born in '71, he spends his childhood basically teaching himself programming. By age 12, he writes the code for a simple video game called Blastar and actually manages to sell it. Now, okay, it wasn't a billion-dollar company, but it showed something absolutely crucial. He was already figuring out how to commercialize tech. Fast forward a bit, he moves to Canada, then the US to study physics and economics, but when the internet boom hits in the mid-90s, he completely abandons his academic path. He teams up with his brother to start a company called Zip2, doing online city guides, and this is where the real struggle begins. They couldn't even afford an apartment. They literally slept on futons in their tiny rented office and showered at the local YMCA. They put in brutal, nonstop hours until, finally, in 1999, Compaq acquires the company. Boom, he makes his first major fortune.
So what does he do next? Buy a yacht? Take a vacation? Nope. Instead of just enjoying the cash, he immediately pivots and places a massive bet on a heavily guarded, hyper-regulated industry: banking. He founds an online financial company called X.com. You have to remember, in the late 90s, the idea of trusting the internet with your bank account was radical. Nobody was doing this. It was an incredibly audacious move for a 20-something to try and disrupt these deeply entrenched financial institutions. But, as we know, this company eventually merges and evolves into PayPal. It completely changed the way people send money online.
And once again, his company became extremely valuable. In 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for a staggering $1.5 billion. From that single sale, Musk personally walked away with around $165 million. To put that into perspective, that is buy a private island and literally never work another day in your life money. This right here is the exact point where most normal people, and honestly even most highly successful entrepreneurs, would have just stopped and enjoyed their winnings. But Musk had much bigger ambitions. He wanted to tackle problems that seemed entirely impossible, and one of the biggest ones? Space.
Which brings us to the 2008 financial abyss. Because, as you can imagine, chasing the impossible comes with some pretty impossible hurdles. And this is where the story takes a nosedive, from massive wealth right to the absolute brink of ruin. So in 2002, he found SpaceX. The ultimate goal? Making humanity a multiplanetary civilization. No big deal, right? But reality hit hard. Building rockets is extraordinarily complex and totally unforgiving. The first launch? Fails, burning up millions of dollars. The second launch? Fails. The third launch? Fails again. 3 consecutive catastrophic explosions. Musk was rapidly running out of money and running out of time. He'd poured almost all of his PayPal fortune into this dream, and it was quite literally blowing up in his face.
And to make matters worse, at the exact same time, Tesla was facing some very serious problems of its own.
They were trying to prove electric cars could actually be fast and desirable, which, shocker, required enormous, totally unexpected amounts of capital. So by 2008, it's a perfect storm. Tesla's burning through cash, SpaceX has failed 3 times in a row, and oh yeah, the global financial crisis is melting down the entire world economy. Musk had to split his last remaining funds between SpaceX and Tesla, basically risking the total death of both companies. He was facing personal bankruptcy, literally borrowing money from friends just so he could pay his own rent. He was at the absolute brink. And then came SpaceX's 4th launch attempt. With literally the last of the company's funds on the line, the Falcon 1 rocket successfully reached orbit. That single dramatic success proved the technology, secured a massive NASA contract, and saved the whole shebang.
Okay, so he survived. Next up, disrupting unchangeable industries. With basic survival secured, his focus shifted to fundamentally changing how these massive sectors actually operated.
Think about it. For decades, the old way of doing aerospace was treating rockets as disposable vehicles. You launch them exactly once, and millions of dollars of advanced hardware just falls straight into the ocean. It made space travel incredibly expensive and, honestly, pretty stagnant. Musk's way was entirely different, developing reusable technology. SpaceX actually figured out how to land and reuse orbital rocket boosters, a feat that aerospace veterans insisted was just a foolish fantasy. This dramatic reduction in launch costs completely upended the stagnant aerospace norms and basically changed the economics of space access forever.
Meanwhile, over at Tesla, they survived the 2008 crash and finally released the Model S. And guys, this wasn't just another electric car. It wasn't a golf cart. It was incredibly fast, it looked premium, and it proved to consumers once and for all that EVs didn't have to be boring compromises. Tesla gained massive momentum, became one of the world's most valuable automakers, and essentially forced traditional legacy companies like Ford, GM, Volkswagen to totally pivot and invest billions into electric vehicles. He didn't just build a car, he forced the entire global auto industry to change its trajectory.
Moving into our next section, expanding the tech empire. Because with functional rockets and thriving cars, you'd think he'd take a breath, right? Nope, he didn't stop.
He systematically enters industries that are famously difficult to penetrate. Just look at this lineup. Consider Neuralink, tackling brain-computer interfaces. That involves navigating the insane complexities of neuroscience, plus incredibly strict FDA regulations. Then there's The Boring Company, aiming at underground transportation, taking on the logistical nightmares and huge physical costs of digging tunnels under major cities. Then you have X, formerly Twitter, navigating the chaotic landscape of global social media. And of course, his various projects focused on artificial intelligence. It's like he's continually looking for the most difficult, unyielding sectors of technology and just attempting to force a disruption, no matter how much resistance there is.
And we have to talk about one of the biggest, most publicized chapters of his career, his move into social media. In 2022, he acquired Twitter for approximately $44 billion and rebranded the whole platform to X. Now, taking over a massive, entrenched global public square created enormous turbulence. We saw significant employee exits, sweeping platform policy changes, and major concerns from advertisers as he completely restructured the company. But regardless of whether you admire or criticize his specific leadership style during this transition, the sheer scale of taking a $44 billion gamble on a complex, deeply entrenched social network, it perfectly illustrates his unwavering appetite for extreme risk.
All right, let's wrap this up with the core lesson, refusing to give up. Because Musk's journey isn't just a highlight reel of easy successes. It is a story of enormous, repeated risk, immense financial pressure, and really heavy public scrutiny.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial underlying methodology here is actually pretty simple. Big companies begin with a massive problem that someone believes can be solved differently. Zip2 started with the internet revolutionizing media, PayPal with the need for digital payments, SpaceX with the need to make space travel dramatically cheaper, Tesla with the need to prove electric cars could be highly desirable. His whole approach is to identify a massive, seemingly impossible industry bottleneck and then just endure years of brutal experimentation, failure, and persistence to finally break through and solve it.
Elon Musk's story is still actively being written. SpaceX is still aggressively pushing toward Mars. Tesla is developing new autonomous tech. X is evolving under its new structure. Neuralink is pushing biological boundaries. And AI is fast becoming this massive technological battleground. Whether he ultimately succeeds in all of his biggest ambitions, well, that's something only the future can reveal. But his journey has already permanently changed multiple global industries. The story of Elon Musk isn't really about money. It's about what happens when someone is willing to chase ideas that most people consider absolutely impossible, and just keep going when those ideas inevitably hit a wall. I want to leave you with this thought to consider. The biggest breakthroughs don't begin with success. They begin with someone refusing to give up. Thanks so much for exploring this topic with me, and I will see you in the next explainer.